Hello, everyone. It's only 10:59 here in New York, so I'll give it a little bit more time for everyone to hop on. And boy, January felt super long around here, Rennie.
Yes, it did.
Yeah, I think that the cold freezes even the time a bit. All right, 15 more seconds here. I'm seeing that the numbers are still kind of coming up as people are joining. All right, I'll kick us off because we only have 30 minutes here. So, welcome everyone to February's Tariff Tea. Rennie, I don't know if I mentioned to you, but I successfully completed dry January. um, I drank a lot of tea, since as we were saying, New York and the entire Northeast turned into Antarctica for most of the month. Um, but when I reviewed this deck, creating the deck for today's webinar on Sunday, which was February 1st, I immediately started drinking again. Because unfortunately, if you were all hoping that the tariff kettle would simmer this month, sorry, the lid's already flying off. And I know that we call it the tariff tea, but some people like milk with their tea. So got a new t-shirt to show off to everyone today. So quick housekeeping as always. I know these things kind of feel like the old school like disclaimer case with McDonald's, I think it was, where it says caution, contents are hot. But when you order tea, it can be hot. So everything we cover here today is for informational purposes only. It's not legal advice. Regulations, as always, move fast and facts matter. So please always review your specific situation with your internal or external advisors. And with that, let's jump in. Welcome, everyone. I'm Nunzio De Filippis. I'm the co-CEO of CargoTrans and a licensed customs broker. I'm joined by Rennie, our Director of Trade Compliance, who's also a licensed customs broker. And together, we're here, as always, to break down what's hot in the world of tariffs, share a little bit of what we call the CargoTrans insider brew. We're also going to walk through today's strategy spotlight, which is on import compliance manuals, and we'll leave some time. Hopefully, we'll have some time for Q&A. Feel free to just add questions throughout the webinar, and we'll get to as many as we can. And if we don't get to it, we'll always get back to you after the webinar is complete. So, hot headlines, right? Where things stand. As you all know, the Supreme Court we're still waiting to hear from them in terms of the legality of the IEEPA tariffs. And as of this point, we're still no decision. Um, Quick reminder, right? We mentioned this last time. In a few days, on February 6th, CBP is officially only giving refunds electronically. So again, if you're an importer and you're on this webinar and you haven't logged into ACE and you don't know where to plug in your electronic refund data, please reach out to us and we'll help you out, because if there are any refunds, the only way that you're getting them is electronically. Um, Even though the Supreme Court justices have had like a zipped lip for now, the CIT has been a little bit more active, and so it was nice to see that they've confirmed refunds for all. Right. In other words, it's not just selected for those who filed first, and U.S. importers, they don't have to kind of had that fear of if entries have been liquidated, what happens? They've confirmed refunds for liquidated and unliquidated. It doesn't matter the order. Also, just as important, they've confirmed that all types of refunds would be refundable, all EPA. So, meaning it's not just a reciprocal, but there's also the additional tariffs that exist for countries like Brazil that would also be, and the previously paid India tariffs as well will also be part of the IEPA refunds. So this is something that we've seen on social media, this kind of taco, right? This Trump always chickens out. I'll say I don't think that's a very accurate statement on social media because we have plenty of tariffs to be talking about. However, in this case with Greenland, it did cause an interesting kind of series of events, right? Uh, they were EU was kind of at 10%. Then we kind of said, hey, we're going to bump you up to 25%. Then we decided just kidding. We're not going to do 25. We'll leave it at the 10. Uh, the kind of reaction though, where it backfired a bit, is that the EU Parliament suspended progress on the proposed EU-US trade agreement. So this did kind of slow up, those negotiations. The one that's still pending out there that we don't know, right, is this doing business with Iran tariff. It was tweeted out that a 25% tariff would be applied if you're a country that's doing business with Iran. But after that, we really haven't heard anything official. So it's still out there, and we're still keeping an eye on it. Um, Canada, right, was mentioned by Trump's Truth Social post a couple of weeks ago, saying you're going to get 100% tariff for being friends with China, right? So the Canada has recently reduced some tariffs with China, such as they're cutting its 100% surcharge on Chinese electronic vehicles, and then China also agreed to lower some tariffs on Canada. So Trump warned Canada if they continue down this kind of path of being friends and goes beyond these reduced tariffs, that they may face some additional tariffs from the U.S. Rennie, what other strategies might be at play here when Trump postures in this way with Canada?
Well, the response that the administration has, right, is that anything that is not favorable for the conversation of U.S. implemented tariffs, right, will be responded by this threat of issuing new tariffs against anyone who plays. So you mentioned in the text that being friends with China, and again, it does very appropriate. It reminds me of being in a schoolyard, right? And someone telling you that because I'm not friends with them, I don't want you to be friends with them. And if you are, I'm going to tax you your lunch money, right? And I'm going to make you, again, move away from that posture. So this is not limited to simply the Canada-China relationship. We've seen this again. You mentioned the Iran issue. We've seen this with Venezuela, right? We've seen this with Russian oil. And again, I agree with your earlier comments. This is not a threat that goes always unimplemented, right? Because the Russian oil tax was implemented, right? So we can expect to see more of this, right? Because character traits when it comes to these tariffs and the implementation of them normally will follow the initial threat. Right. And there are those who believe this is a negotiation tool and tactic without implementation. But we've seen firsthand the implementation of tariffs across the board in many situations. To me, I treat it as, an indication, as a snapshot, as a preface to what's on the table and what's in his mind.
Right. And how about the USMCA? Does that kind of get muddled into this as well?
Well, yeah, I mean, we have the pending USMCA agreement that's scheduled again for late June going into July of 2026, right? And already noted that the threat from the US government was to Canada. Now's a bad time to start, getting us upset about you doing business with China when we have this pending USMCA agreement. So, again, I think there is synergies with reciprocal, and hate to use that word reciprocal, but there's going to be some sort of effect on any future negotiations, especially a free trade agreement, and whether we move to that same structure of USMCA or possibly bilateral agreements separately with Canada and Mexico, simply because both are viewed in different, sites as far as the administration is concerned over who is cooperating more, Canada and Mexico.
Great, thank you. And so off to South Korea, where Trump was forced to respond in a way, right? So initially, South Korea had a 25% reciprocal. We negotiated a deal to bring it down to 15. We thought that deal was finalized, but then it ends up in South Korea's legislation, and it was kind of some parts of the deal were rejected, and so we didn't get what we thought we were getting out of the deal, and Trump quickly responded by saying, well, then you're back at 25%. And that's where we're at. We don't, as far as last I checked, we don't have an effective date for that yet, but we're waiting for further information on when that bump comes into play. And the last 2 points. So last week, right, there was this landmark EU India. I've heard it kind of quoted as the mother of all deals, made in
Yeah.
terms of a trade agreement, and that's because how massive it is, right? These
Yeah.
two blocks and markets are, 2 billion people and covers about 25% of the global GDP. So, lots of opportunity there. And, this was kind of the reverse of where our, kind of tariff and trade strategy has been, where tariffs have been going up. This is a significant deal to really reduce and get to closer to a free trade, kind of deal between the EU and India, which will be layered out through the next few years. And I don't know if that deal sparked our conversations with India or not, but yesterday, Trump said, hey, Modi is my BFF, right? And we're going to give him a tariff break because we're such great friends. And so, very significant, I'd say, reduction, where the reciprocal 25% tariff went down to 18%. And what I'm seeing further reports now is that also the 25% um, buying of Russian oil will be going away as well. Um, how we measure that, how that, kind of they wean off of the oil, I guess to be seen. Um, as of right now, even though the Trump said this is effective immediately, as always, we're still waiting for the USTR or guidance from customs in terms of the effective dates of this new reduced tariff. But Rennie, what's your guidance, if any, for importers with entries pending from India origin?
Well, since we're in this, very fluid situation, right, where we have this tweet and this announcement on Truth Social, but we don't have yet the executive order. We don't yet have the CSMS message. My recommendation is to advise your brokers not to make entry, today or tomorrow, if you are still within that 15-day period where entry again allowance allows you to again withhold entry filing. I would at least, again, weigh the ROI, the risk of your investment, to wait until we get this executive order, which could come out later today. It could come out tomorrow, because we want to make sure that we understand, as it is written, the effective date. We want to make sure that the scope and the boundaries of this change, again, we can maximize and not have to rely on a retroactive date right, as an allowance to be realized, as has been the case in certain situations where the immediacy of something comes out, and then they go back and say, well, this is retroactive to, two weeks before, or to avoid this on the water provision. So I'd say if you can wait, and make that entry decision after we get more definitive information, separate from what we've received as late as yesterday.
Great. Okay, so now we get to a little bit of what we call our insider brew. Um, I'll start with sharing kind of this interesting stat, right? The pre-tariff or pre-Liberation Day era, we saw about 90% of entries that were filed were liquidated as entered, right? That means however it was entered, customs didn't come back with any changes, right? Not, probably about 90%. We're quickly seeing in this new era, right, of elevated tariffs, that number really starting to drop, right? And last month, Rennie, we discussed CBP's aggressive approach with issuing notice of actions, right, skipping the request for information, going right to CF-29s, targeting specifically Section 232 steel and aluminum derivatives. Now this month, right, what we're starting to see in the trenches is a more broad, right, and kind of execution. And often a lot of these CF-29s are coming with a pretty little invoice, right, attached to it. And so, where are these invoices showing up? And Rennie, like under some cases, I've even seen where customs is pressuring the broker to pay the additional invoice. So, like, can you give us some insight on what's going on here? What's a broker to do? Where are the gaps? How does the importer, aware of these kind of potential additional invoices that are showing up?
Right. Well, yeah, this all goes back to the legacy of importer reasonable care, right? The ability to have access to your ACE activity, to be transparent to decisions that are made at the time of liquidation, and have a process in place that when you do receive through ACE notifications these liquidation decisions, that you're not just the broker, right? But this is first the importer's responsibility, because there are some times where the communication is going to be sent directly to the importer, and the result of that decision is going to be an ACE liquidation decision and report, which again the broker has access to. But this is a very, very fluid and growing situation, as you mentioned in your stat on customs actions. And it's the, you know important, it just stresses the importance of having a supervision and control process with transparency to your import data as an importer, and more regular and frequent conversations between the importer and the broker to say, hey, maybe we need to be running our liquidation reports instead of monthly. We need to be running that weekly, daily, and anything that you see, please reach out to us. Don't assume that the importer has this, and is aware of it. And more importantly, to your question, what to do. If you get a bill from customs, the first responsibility of an importer is to pay the bill, right? If you want to argue and dispute a customs decision, again, keep in mind the liquidation of an entry, customs has full authority to do so. You can, as an importer, protest any customs decision. You have ability to petition and argue, but once an action has been taken and a bill has been issued, which is the growing case, your response, number one, is to understand what that is, link back to your entry. And if it's linked to an entry number, you should be able to internally, as an importer, go back and look at those details and again ascertain what that decision is in reference to, whether you agree or not, and utilize the actual avenues that are available to you through petition, protest, and or response to customs.
Great, thank you. It kind of really leads into this accountability gap, right? That kind of may exist today, right? Um, and so really leads into our strategy spotlight for today, which is import compliance manuals, and why we believe they matter more now more than ever before. And I'll share that oftentimes, and especially throughout the past 6 7 months, our sales team and I will regular pulse, like live poll surveys when we're in meetings, and we'll ask, hey, we'll ask the importer, do you all have an import compliance manual? I'll say that I don't let them sit in the silence too long with this question, because you can kind of quickly tell that many are kind of like, I don't know if I have that, and I don't know if I really want to admit it. And so we generally ask the question and then quickly follow with, it's okay if you say no, right? And because the majority of importers, probably like if you're under that like 2,000 containers a year, may not have a documented import compliance manual. And on the flip side, the ones that have one sort of did it years ago to check a box, right? And they haven't maintained it. So Rennie, with import compliance matter, why, for that question, why does this matter more now than ever? And what does a good import compliance manual actually do?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the importance of a compliance manual today is very, very significant to the success of your efforts to mitigate not only tariff exposure, but the exposure of increased enforcement. If I told you that the state police had ramped up their efforts of enforcement and they're issuing tickets more aggressive to those who are driving in their daily path to work, right? That they are really honing in on that. And you, as a driver, continue to drive the way you've been driving simply because you fell on the belief that you had never been pulled over before, right? That's not cognizant of this new era, right? It's no surprise that enforcement is a top priority for this administration. They told us that back in November of last year. And as they increase trade enforcement, the statistics, again, are very transparent in the result of what you mentioned earlier on the CF-29 notices of action, right? But link back to the basic core responsibilities of an importer. This isn't new. This goes back to 1993 under the Modernization Act. This goes back to 2016 under the Trade Facilitation and Trade Enforcement Act, which all gave the actual hint that trade enforcement was a priority moving forward of customs as, again, a tool that would not only complement revenue collection, but would, in the eyes of the enforcement-minded individuals, increase the performance level and separate bad actors from good actors. And the importance of having, a defensible process in place, because that's what a compliance manual is. It isn't an off-the-shelf SOP, standard operating procedure, that says, here's who we are, and yes, we have valuation, classification, record keeping, and I could just put my name in a manual and say I do these things, right? That's not a compliance manual that's effective. Again, instructs internally and makes aware internally within your own importing structure, as well as to your broker, to your other business partners in your supply chain, a process flow, a roadmap on how you are defending those very important categories of valuation, classification, and tariff mitigation and management, right? As just some examples. But the core representation of that manual is an automatic mitigating factor to fines and penalties, because compliance manuals don't guarantee that you are perfect, that you are infallible. It provides the evidence to any enforcement effort that you are meeting responsible and reasonable care, that you didn't take a dart and throw it at a dartboard and come up with a value, that you didn't just all of a sudden decide, oh, there's a steel value content. All right, just say 3%, right? Why? Because I was at a dinner party and someone told me 3% is acceptable, right? Your compliance manual is going to define exactly how you not only came about it, but informed compliance, how you learned about it, how you socialized it, how you went and put a plan together. Doesn't mean customs will agree. It defends reasonable care. And if you don't have that today, then there is zero mitigation in an environment where they are targeting importers who have the appearance of non-compliance. Because enforcement doesn't mean that you committed fraud, right? It means that you did not meet the compliance requirements of as an importer. And there are 3 degrees of culpability. Again, fraud, gross negligence, and negligence, right? And you, irregardless of one of those 3, you want to be able to demonstrate that you tried, that you're aware of it, that you put forth a reasonable effort to get it right. And that's the position that a good compliance manual will put you in.
Yeah, I mean, I often like to say an import compliance manual, right? It doesn't stop CBP from knocking, right? But it does determine how that conversations goes when they do knock, right? So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
it explains like who's responsible for what. It explains like how decisions are made, how risk is identified and escalated, how corrections are handled, right? So um, it does make and really guide that conversation. And oftentimes what we'll say is it creates this playbook for an importer where you have some sort of offense in your strategy, right?
Absolutely.
Way too often importers only play defense, and which
Right.
basically means they don't do it until customs comes knocking, and then there's the fire drill of
Yep.
how do we answer them? Who do I call? Where's my broker? Do I get a customs attorney? Um, and as you said, in this enforcement era that we're in, they're not like very patient, right? You have your
Not at
you
all.
have your time limits. They're not extending those.
Not at all.
This was entered months ago. You should have the information. Let's go.
Absolutely.
Where is it? So
Compliance
great.
demonstration is not a nice to have. It's a must have, right? And you have to have it in this day and age.
Yeah, yeah. And it also, I think it shows customs, one, you have internal controls. There's a process for training your people.
Correct.
You review and you have self audits. And again, you're not just guessing, right? There's an intentionality behind how you do business with customs, right? So,
Correct.
yeah, super super important. So we're just about at the end here. Um, Before we wrap it up, Val, I think you're on the call somewhere. Are there any questions that came in that you want to share with us?
Yes, absolutely. So we have a question right here. It says, should your broker be making decisions for you or executing decisions you've documented?
Randy, you
Uh,
want to take that?
Sure, sure. First, let me just remind it. Good question, right? Because there are many importers who believe, I think my reasonable care is that I have a broker and I'm not doing this alone, right? And that my broker could represent me because I gave him a power of attorney and my broker can make those decisions on my behalf. And that is not 100% true. Having a broker is a great thing. However, a broker should never be making decisions on your behalf without your knowledge and concurrence. The power of attorney gives them authorization to represent you and conduct business on your behalf and to provide you with expert advice on matters that face you as an importer. But even if the broker made a decision that was a correct decision, your absence as part of that decision and implementation process alone is a penalty. That's called lack of supervision and control. So those who say I have a great broker, but internally we don't know what we're doing, right? That is a huge no-no, right? Because again, a broker is licensed to conduct customs business on your behalf, not as a replacement to your knowledge or awareness or responsibility about those decisions.
Yep, it is a partnership and collaboration, and it should be documented as such. So we only have about a minute and a half here, so I think I'll wrap things up. Um, as everyone can see, tariffs and trade did not accomplish a dry January like I did. CBP is stepping up its aggressiveness here, and we want you all to add offense to your playbook. So if you have any questions about anything that we went over today, please reach out to us and sign up for our next series, which is on the first Tuesday of every month at 11 a.m. Eastern. Thank you all for joining. See you next time.